The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Mia Reynolds slowly opened her eyes, the sterile scent of antiseptic filling her nostrils. Confusion washed over her as she tried to make sense of her surroundings. White walls, beeping machines, and the unmistakable sound of hospital activity in the corridor outside. A dull ache pulsed through her body, concentrated most severely in her left side and head. "You're awake," a gentle voice said. An older nurse with kind eyes adjusted something on one of the machines. "You gave us quite a scare, dear." Mia attempted to sit up, but winced as pain shot through her ribs. What happened?" Her voice was barely a whisper, her throat dry and scratchy. "Car accident," the nurse explained, helping Mia sip water through a straw. "A taxi ran a red light and hit your side of the car. You've been unconscious for nearly 18 hours. Fragments of memory flashed through Mia's mind, the screech of tires shattering glass, a deafening crash. She had been heading home after her evening shift at the downtown diner, exhausted after being on her feet for 10 hours. The baby! The words tumbled from her lips before she could stop them, her hands instinctively moving to her stomach. Panic surged through her veins. The nurse's expression softened. "The baby is fine, honey. We've been monitoring closely. That little one is quite the fighter, just like Mama." Relief flooded through Mia, momentarily overshadowing her physical pain. At 12 weeks, her pregnancy barely showed, hidden beneath loose-fitting uniforms and aprons at the diner. No one knew. Not her co-workers, not her few friends, and certainly not the baby's father. "We've contacted your emergency contact," the nurse continued, checking Mia's IV. "He should be here soon." Mia's heart lurched painfully in her chest. "My emergency contact? Who?" The question died on her lips as realization dawned. 3 months ago, when she'd started working at the upscale Jackson Square diner, she'd filled out employee paperwork, including emergency contact information. In a moment of weakness, or perhaps hope, she'd written down his name, James Calloway. "No," Mia whispered, panic rising. "No, you can't call him. I need to change that information." The nurse looked confused. "He's already been notified, dear. In fact, he seemed quite concerned and said he'd be here right away." Mia closed her eyes, willing this to be just another part of her nightmare. James Calloway, billionaire tech entrepreneur, her former lover, and the unwitting father of her unborn child, was the last person she wanted to see, especially now, especially like this. Their whirlwind romance had been the stuff of fairy tales, at least in the beginning. They'd met 6 months ago when James had wandered into the diner late one night, dressed in jeans and a simple t-shirt that gave no indication of his wealth. He'd been charming, down to earth, and seemed genuinely interested in her, not just her appearance, but her dreams, her struggles, her mind. For 8 weeks, Mia had lived in a dream. Candlelit dinners, weekend getaways, passionate nights in his penthouse overlooking the city. James had introduced her to a world she'd only glimpsed from the outside, treating her not as an accessory, but as an equal despite the vast gulf between their social positions. Then reality had crashed in. Veronica, his ex-girlfriend from the same privileged world, had returned from her extended European trip. Tall, sophisticated, and impeccably connected, she fit seamlessly into James's life in ways Mia never could. Within days, photos of James and Veronica at charity galas and exclusive events had flooded social media. When James had called Mia to his office, she'd known what was coming. "It's complicated," he'd said, not quite meeting her eyes. "Veronica and I have history, connections, shared interests. Our families have been close for generations." What he hadn't said was equally clear. Mia, with her community college education and waitressing job, had been a temporary diversion, entertaining, perhaps even meaningful, but ultimately unsuitable for his world. She'd walked away with her dignity intact, refusing to cry until she was alone in her tiny apartment. 2 weeks later, when the pregnancy test showed positive, she'd made her decision. She would handle this alone. James had made his choice, and she wouldn't use a baby to force herself into a world that had already rejected her, and now he was coming here. A soft knock at the door pulled Mia from her thoughts. A young doctor entered, clipboard in hand. "Ms. Reynolds, I'm Dr. Patel. How are you feeling?" "Like I've been hit by a car," Mia replied with a weak attempt at humor. The doctor smiled sympathetically. "Well, that's accurate. You have 3 bruised ribs, a mild concussion and various contusions, but you were fortunate. Both you and your baby are stable, though we want to keep you under observation for another day or two." "The baby is really okay?" Mia asked, needing the reassurance. "We'd like to do another ultrasound now that you're awake, just to check everything. We did one when you were brought in, and things looked good, but I'd prefer to be thorough." Mia nodded, and within minutes a technician wheeled in an ultrasound machine. Dr. Patel gently exposed Mia's still flat stomach and applied the cold gel. As she moved the wand across Mia's abdomen, the room filled with a rapid, rhythmic whooshing sound. "That's your baby's heartbeat," Dr. Patel said, smiling. "Strong and steady." Tears welled in Mia's eyes as she stared at the small, bean-shaped figure on the screen. Her baby, hers and James's, growing steadily despite everything. The moment was shattered by a commotion in the hallway, an authoritative voice, hurried responses from the hospital staff. The door to Mia's room swung open, and there he stood. James Calloway filled the doorframe with his tall, imposing presence. Immaculately dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Mia's monthly rent, he looked every bit the powerful billionaire. But his normally composed face was pale with concern, his dark hair slightly disheveled, as if he'd been running his hands through it, a nervous habit Mia remembered well. His eyes found hers first, relief washing over his features. Then his gaze shifted to the ultrasound screen, still displaying the unmistakable image of a fetus, while the rapid heartbeat continued to fill the room. James froze, his expression transforming from concern to shock as the implications hit him. His lips parted, but no words emerged. The color drained further from his face as his eyes darted between Mia's face and the ultrasound image, making the connection that would forever alter the course of their lives. In that suspended moment, as their eyes locked across the hospital room, Mia knew nothing would ever be the same again. The silence stretched between them, taut and heavy with unspoken words. Dr. Patel looked between Mia and James, sensing the tension. "I'll give you some privacy," she said, wiping the gel from Mia's stomach and quietly shutting down the ultrasound machine. "A nurse will check on you shortly." As the door closed behind the doctor, James remained rooted to the spot, his gaze still fixed on Mia's abdomen, where the ultrasound wand had been moments before. "You're pregnant," he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. Mia pulled the thin hospital blanket higher, as if it could shield her from his penetrating stare. "Yes." "And it's—" He couldn't seem to finish the question. "Yours?" Mia's chin lifted slightly, a flash of defiance in her eyes despite her vulnerable position. "Yes, James. The baby is yours." He moved then, taking a few mechanical steps to the chair beside her bed before sinking into it. His hands that confidently guided billion-dollar deals and commanded boardrooms, trembled slightly as he ran them over his face. "How long have you known?" "About 2 months." James's head snapped up, eyes narrowing. 2 months, and you didn't think to tell me? Tell you what exactly?" Mia's voice remained calm, though her heart raced painfully against her bruised ribs. "That the waitress you dumped for your socialite ex-girlfriend was carrying your child? Would that have fit conveniently into your perfect life, James?" He flinched at her words. "That's not fair, Mia. What we had ended when Veronica came back," she interrupted, unwilling to hear whatever rationalization he'd crafted. "You made your choice very clear." James leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Up close, Mia could see the exhaustion etched in the fine lines around his eyes, the tension in his jaw. He looked older than his 34 years in that moment. "You should have told me," he insisted, but the anger in his voice had dimmed, replaced by something more complex. "This isn't just about you or me, it's about our child. Our child." The word sent an unexpected pang through Mia's chest. In the lonely weeks since discovering her pregnancy, she'd thought of the baby as hers alone, her responsibility, her future, her small family of 2. Hearing James claim connection so easily stirred emotions she wasn't prepared to face. "I was going to handle it myself," she said quietly. "I don't need your money, if that's what you're worried about." "Money?" James looked genuinely bewildered. "You think that's my concern right now? My God, Mia, you're lying in a hospital bed after nearly being killed, carrying my child that I just learned exists. Money is the last thing on my mind." Outside the window, rain had begun to fall, pattering softly against the glass and casting the room in a grey, muted light that matched the somber mood. A nurse entered briefly to check Mia's vitals, her cheerful efficiency creating a jarring contrast to the emotional weight hanging in the air. When they were alone again, James spoke more softly. "Why didn't you want me to know?" Mia turned to look out at the rain, finding it easier than meeting his gaze. "You went back to your world, James, back to Veronica and your society functions and board meetings. I saw the pictures of you two together, looking perfect for the cameras. What was I supposed to do? Call your office and leave a message with your assistant. Please inform Mr. Calloway that his former fling is expecting his baby." "I would have answered if you'd called me directly," he countered. "To what end?" Mia's voice cracked slightly. "So you could offer financial support while continuing your life with her? Or maybe suggest I take care of it quietly to avoid complicating things?" The bitterness in her tone surprised even her. James stood abruptly, pacing to the window. His reflection in the glass showed a pained expression. "Is that really what you think of me? That I would abandon my own child? Or pressure you to—" He couldn't finish the sentence. The truth was, Mia didn't know what to think anymore. The James she'd fallen for, thoughtful, gentle, seemingly unconcerned with the vast differences in their backgrounds, had disappeared so quickly when Veronica returned that it had left her questioning everything. Had any of it been real? "I don't know you, James," she admitted softly. "I thought I did, but—" He turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "You're right. I handled things badly when Veronica came back. I let external pressures influence my decisions, and I hurt you. That's on me." He took a deep breath. "But this changes everything, Mia. You have to see that." Before she could respond, her phone buzzed from the small table beside her bed. A text from her roommate and only close friend Zoe, checking if she needed anything. The normalcy of it, the reminder of her real life, grounded Mia. "I need to call my work," she said, suddenly remembering. "They'll fire me if I don't show up for my shift tomorrow." James looked momentarily perplexed by this shift in conversation. Then understanding dawned. "That's what you're worried about right now? Your job at the diner?" "Some of us can't afford to miss paychecks, James," Mia replied, the strain of the situation making her tone sharper than intended. Without hesitation, he pulled out his phone. "What's the manager's name? I'll call right now and explain the situation." "Marcus Phillips. But you don't need to—" James was already dialing, stepping into the hallway to make the call. Through the partially open door, Mia could hear fragments of his conversation. Professional, authoritative, but not unkind. When he returned minutes later, his expression had softened somewhat. "Your job is secure," he said simply. "And they're sending flowers, apparently." Despite everything, Mia felt a small smile tug at her lips. "You didn't threaten to buy the place, did you?" "The thought crossed my mind," he admitted, a ghost of their old rapport briefly resurfacing. Then his expression grew serious again. "Mia, we need to talk about what happens next." The brief moment of levity evaporated. "Nothing has to change, James. I've already made plans." "Plans that don't include the father of your child?" "Plans that are realistic," Mia countered. "You're with Veronica now. You've rejoined your world. The galas, the yachts, the private jets. How exactly do you see me and this baby fitting into that picture?" James was quiet for a long moment, his gaze dropping to her stomach again. "Veronica and I broke up 3 weeks ago," he finally said. The revelation hit Mia like a physical blow. "What? It wasn't right? Going back to her was—" He shook his head. "It was the easy choice, not the right one. Our families were pleased, our social circles approved, but I was miserable." His eyes met hers, vulnerability evident in their depths. "I couldn't stop thinking about you, Mia. I tried to find you, but you'd left the apartment you were in when we were together. Your number was changed." Mia's mind reeled. She'd moved in with Zoe and changed her number specifically to make a clean break, to avoid the temptation of reaching out to him in a moment of weakness. "You broke up with Veronica before you knew about the baby?" she asked carefully. "Yes." His response was immediate, unwavering. "I realized I'd made a terrible mistake." "And then today, getting that call from the hospital," his voice broke slightly. "When they said you were hurt, that you'd been in an accident, I thought I might lose you before I ever had the chance to make things right." Outside, the rain fell harder, drumming against the window as thunder rumbled in the distance. The storm outside mirrored the tumult of emotions within Mia: confusion, hope, fear, and beneath it all, the lingering ache of how deeply his rejection had hurt her. "I don't know what to say," she admitted. This is a lot to process. James moved back to her bedside, hesitantly reaching for her hand. After a moment's hesitation, she allowed him to take it. I know, he said softly. And I know I have no right to walk back into your life and expect anything. But that's my child too, Mia. And regardless of what happens between us, I want to be part of his or her life. As his thumb gently stroked the back of her hand, a gesture so achingly familiar, Mia felt tears threatening again. Hormones, she told herself, but knew it was more than that. I need time, she whispered. This is all happening so fast. James nodded, squeezing her hand gently. We have time. Right now, the most important thing is making sure you and the baby are healthy and safe. He paused, then added carefully, Will you let me help with that at least? Before Mia could answer, there was another knock at the door. The nurse entered with a dinner tray, breaking the intimate moment. As she fussed around Mia, checking monitors and adjusting pillows, James reluctantly released her hand and stepped back. But his eyes never left her face, filled with a determination that Mia recognized all too well. James Calloway was a man accustomed to getting what he wanted, to overcoming obstacles through sheer will and resources. Now, it seemed, those formidable qualities were focused on her and their unborn child. What that meant for her carefully constructed plans, for the independent future she'd envisioned, Mia wasn't sure. But as she watched him speaking quietly with the nurse, arranging for her comfort with the same attention to detail he likely applied to his business deals, one thing became startlingly clear. Nothing would be simple anymore. 3 days later, Mia found herself not in her cramped apartment shared with Zoe, but in the guest suite of James's sprawling penthouse overlooking the city. The decision hadn't come easily. She'd protested vigorously when he'd first suggested it, but her practical nature eventually prevailed over pride. It's just until you're fully recovered, James had insisted, as she was discharged from the hospital. The doctor said you shouldn't be alone, and your apartment doesn't have an elevator. My place has a medical-grade bed being delivered, round-the-clock security, and I've arranged for a nurse to check on you daily. I can't afford any of that, Mia had countered. I'm not asking you to. Now, as morning light streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, Mia sat propped against pillows on a bed, more comfortable than any she'd ever slept in. Her bruises had begun to fade from angry purple to yellowish green, and the pain in her ribs had dulled to a manageable ache. On the bedside table sat a breakfast tray with fresh fruit, whole-grain toast, and prenatal vitamins. James had apparently consulted with a nutritionist specializing in prenatal care. A soft knock at the door preceded James's entrance, already dressed for the office in a tailored navy suit, his dark hair still damp from the shower. How are you feeling this morning? He asked, his gaze automatically dropping to her stomach, as it often did. Better, Mia admitted. The nausea isn't as bad today. He nodded, relieved. I have meetings until 3, but Mrs. Winters will be here if you need anything, and the nurse is coming at noon. Mrs. Winters, James's housekeeper of 15 years, had taken an immediate liking to Mia, treating her with a motherly concern that made the opulent surroundings feel somewhat less intimidating. I'll be fine, Mia assured him. You don't need to rearrange your entire life for me. A shadow crossed his face. My entire life is already rearranged, Mia, in the best possible way. He gestured to the breakfast tray. Make sure you eat everything. Dr. Winters said your iron levels were still low. After he left, Mia struggled against conflicting emotions. James had been nothing but considerate since bringing her to his home, respectful of her space, attentive to her needs, never pressuring her about their relationship. Yet she couldn't shake the feeling that she was losing control of her own narrative, being absorbed into his world exactly as she'd feared. That afternoon, while James was still at the office, Zoe came to visit, her eyes widening as the private elevator opened directly into the penthouse foyer. Holy crap, she whispered, taking in the sweeping views, modern art, and obvious luxury. When you said you were staying at the baby daddy's place, you failed to mention it was an actual palace in the sky. Mia smiled weakly as they settled in the guest suite sitting area. It's temporary. Zoe raised an eyebrow, her pink-tipped hair falling across her forehead. Is it? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like Billionaire baby daddy is setting up house. It's not like that, Mia protested. He's just being responsible. Mia, Zoe said gently, the man has redecorated an entire suite for you, hired medical staff, and apparently bought out half the maternity section at Nordstrom. She nodded toward the walk-in closet, where several shopping bags with designer labels sat unopened. That goes beyond responsibility. Mia couldn't argue with the observation. Yesterday, packages had arrived containing maternity clothes in exactly her size, comfortable yet elegant pieces she could never have afforded. When she'd questioned James, he'd simply shrugged and said, "You mentioned your jeans were getting tight." "I don't know what he wants," Mia confessed, absently running a hand over her stomach, where the smallest bump had begun to form. "Sometimes I catch him looking at me like he used to. Other times he's so formal and careful, like I'm some delicate business negotiation." "Have you tried, I don't know, asking him?" Zoe suggested with characteristic bluntness. Before Mia could respond, the elevator chimed, announcing James's early return. He entered carrying more shopping bags and a thick folder of papers. "Oh," he said, seeming momentarily thrown by Zoe's presence. "I didn't realize you had company." Zoe stood, extending her hand with more confidence than most people showed around him. "I'm Zoe Bennett, Mia's best friend and former roommate. I've heard absolutely nothing about you, which means you must be pretty special." James's surprise gave way to a genuine smile as he shook her hand. "James Calloway. I've heard quite a bit about you, actually. Mia says you've been her rock these past months." "Someone had to be," Zoe replied pointedly. An awkward silence fell, broken, when James cleared his throat. "I'll leave you two to visit. Mia, when you have a moment, I'd like to discuss something with you." After he disappeared down the hallway, Zoe let out a low whistle. "Wow. The tension in here is thicker than my grandma's gravy. And that's saying something." Despite everything, Mia laughed, her first real laugh in days. "It's complicated." "Life usually is," Zoe replied, suddenly serious. "But Mia, speaking as someone who grew up with a single mom struggling to make ends meet, if this guy genuinely wants to be involved, to provide for his child, don't let pride stop you." She squeezed Mia's hand. "Just be sure you're not trading your independence for security. No penthouse is worth that." After Zoe left, Mia found James in his home office, bent over his laptop. He looked up when she entered, his expression unreadable. "You wanted to talk?" she prompted. "Yes." He closed the laptop and gestured to the chair opposite his desk. "I had my lawyers draw up some papers." Mia's heart sank. So it would be formal after all. Financial arrangements, custody agreements, the business-like dissection of their unplanned connection. James slid the folder across the desk. "It's a trust for the baby. I've set aside $20 million initially with provisions for education, healthcare, and future security. You'll be a co-trustee with full access." Mia stared at the folder without opening it, feeling suddenly nauseous again. $20 million? "It's a starting point," James said, as if discussing a modest savings account. "I want to be clear that you'll both be taken care of, regardless of other circumstances." "Other circumstances," Mia repeated flatly. "You mean regardless of whether I decide to let you into our lives?" James leaned back in his chair, his professional demeanor slipping. "That's not what I meant. I just wanted to address the practical matters first, to show you I'm serious about my commitment." "With money," Mia said, the words tasting bitter. "It's what I know how to do, Mia." For the first time since the hospital, frustration crept into his voice. "I can't carry the baby for you. I can't erase the fact that I hurt you. But I can make sure neither of you ever has to worry about healthcare or education or opportunity." "Is that so wrong?" Mia stared at him, really seeing him for perhaps the first time since the accident. Behind the polished exterior of the billionaire was a man floundering, trying to find solid ground in a situation he couldn't control with his usual tools: wealth, influence, strategic planning. "No," she said more softly. "It's not wrong. It's actually very thoughtful." "But James, this baby isn't a business venture, and I'm not an investment." He ran a hand through his hair, mussing his perfect style. "I know that. God, Mia, don't you think I know that? I'm trying my best here, but I have no blueprint for this, no manual for how to tell the woman you never stop loving that you want more than just financial involvement in her life and your child's." The words hung in the air between them. Never stopped loving. Mia felt as if the floor had tilted beneath her. "What did you just say?" she whispered. James looked stricken, as if he hadn't meant to make such a revelation, but rather than backpedal, he met her gaze directly. "I never stopped loving you, Mia. Going back to Veronica was the biggest mistake of my life. I knew it almost immediately, but my pride, He shook his head. By the time I worked up the courage to find you, you were gone. Mia sank deeper into the chair, one hand instinctively covering her small bump. You broke my heart, she said quietly. I trusted you and you discarded me for someone who fit better into your world. I know, he acknowledged, the pain evident in his voice. And I've regretted it every day since. When I got that call from the hospital, he swallowed hard. I thought I was being given a second chance just to make amends, finding out about the baby. It was like the universe was offering me a miracle I don't deserve. Mia didn't know what to say. Part of her, the part that still woke reaching for him in the night, wanted to believe him. Another part, the protective shell she'd built around her heart, warned that words came easily to a man like James. Actions were what mattered. I need to think, she finally said, rising carefully to avoid jarring her healing ribs. This is a lot to process. James nodded, not pushing further. Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere. That evening, Mia sat on the guest suite's balcony, watching the city lights flicker to life as dusk descended. Her phone buzzed with a text from Zoe. Well? Did you talk to him? Before she could respond, she heard voices from the main balcony around the corner, James speaking to someone. Curious, she moved closer to the partition separating the spaces. I don't care what the board thinks, Michael, James was saying tersely. I'm not flying to Tokyo next week. Mia needs me here. A pause, then. Yes, I understand it's $100 million deal. Find another solution. Another pause, longer this time. When James spoke again, his voice had hardened. Let me be very clear. My priorities have changed. My family comes first now. Yes, I said family. Mia and our child are my primary concern. If the board has a problem with that, they're welcome to review my controlling interest in the company. The conviction in his voice sent an unexpected warmth through Mia's chest. Family. He'd called them his family. As she slipped back to her own balcony, a movement in the penthouse across the street caught her attention. A telephoto camera lens glinted in the fading light, pointed directly at James's balcony. Paparazzi. Cold dread washed over her. How long had they been watching? What had they seen? The tabloids had always been obsessed with James's life, his wealth, his relationships, his business dealings. If they discovered his former waitress girlfriend was now living in his penthouse pregnant with his child, the carefully controlled environment James had created suddenly felt like a gilded cage. This was his world, a world of scrutiny, speculation, and judgment. A world where private moments became public fodder, where relationships were dissected for entertainment. Could she really raise a child in such a fishbowl? Could she subject herself to that level of exposure? The trust fund and financial security James offered seemed hollow compared to the price of privacy she might have to pay. As night fell completely, Mia made a decision. She needed to protect herself and her baby, not just financially but emotionally, and that meant establishing clear boundaries with James, regardless of his declarations of love or family. Tomorrow she would tell him her decision. But as she placed her hand on her growing bump, feeling a flutter that might have been the baby moving for the first time, doubt crept in. Was she making the right choice, or was fear of vulnerability, of hurt, of the unknown, driving her away from what might be her chance at real happiness? The city lights blurred as tears filled her eyes, leaving her alone with questions that had no easy answers. The morning headlines hit like a tsunami. Tech billionaire's secret baby scandal. James Calloway's pregnant waitress moves in. Mia stared at the tablet James had wordlessly handed her, her breakfast untouched as nausea rose that had nothing to do with her pregnancy. The article featured grainy telephoto images of her on the balcony, her hand resting on her small bump. Another showed James in profile, speaking intensely on his phone. The piece was filled with sources close to the couple and speculation about their relationship. "I'm so sorry," James said, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. "My security team is investigating how they got these photos. The building across the street has strict privacy policies." Mia set the tablet down, her hands trembling. "This is exactly what I was afraid of." James sat beside her on the edge of the bed, careful not to crowd her. "I know, and you were right to be concerned." He ran a hand over his face, looking exhausted. "My PR team wants to release a statement, but I told them nothing happens without your approval." "A statement? Mia echoed, the reality of her new situation sinking in. About me. About our baby. They think getting ahead of the story is the best approach, James explained gently. But this is your life too, Mia, your privacy. If you want to say nothing, we say nothing. The considerate response surprised her. She'd expected James to take control, to manage the situation as he did everything else in his life. Instead, he was deferring to her, acknowledging her agency in a situation that affected them both. What would this statement say? She asked cautiously. The truth, James replied simply, that we're expecting a child together, that we're committed to co-parenting, regardless of our personal relationship status. Nothing more, nothing less. Mia considered this. The statement was factual, dignified, and remarkably free of the emotional complications swirling between them. It also made no promises about their future that she wasn't ready to make. Okay, she agreed reluctantly, but no interviews, no photos, nothing beyond the basic facts. James nodded, relief evident in his expression. I'll make that clear. He hesitated, then added, there's something else we need to discuss. The paparazzi situation isn't going to improve anytime soon. This building has good security, but they'll be waiting whenever you leave. I can't live like that, Mia said immediately, panic rising at the thought of being hounded by photographers, her every move scrutinized. I know, James said. That's why I wanted to suggest an alternative. He explained that he owned a secluded estate outside the city, a modern house nestled on 30 acres of wooded land with state-of-the-art security. It was private, peaceful, and only a 40-minute drive from the city. We could go there until the media frenzy dies down, he suggested. There's plenty of space. You'd have your own wing of the house if you wanted. Complete privacy. Mia's first instinct was to refuse, to see this as another attempt to isolate her in his world. But the thought of facing cameras and shouted questions every time she stepped outside the penthouse was equally unappealing. I need to think about it, she said finally. Later that afternoon, as Mia packed an overnight bag with the few possessions she'd brought to the penthouse, she tried to sort through her jumbled emotions. The overnight bag had turned into a more extended stay than she'd anticipated, and now James was suggesting an even more secluded arrangement. Was she running away with him, or running away from reality? A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Mrs. Winters stood in the doorway with a sympathetic smile. Mr. Calloway asked me to check if you needed help packing, the older woman said. I'm fine, thank you, Mia replied, folding a sweater that still smelled like her small apartment, a life that seemed increasingly distant. Mrs. Winters lingered, her expression thoughtful. You know, I've worked for Mr. Calloway for 15 years, she said conversationally. Seen all his ups and downs, his successes and mistakes. Mia stilled her hands, sensing the housekeeper had more to say. In all that time, Mrs. Winters continued, I've never seen him like this. When that hospital called, she shook her head. He was terrified, Ms. Reynolds, not just concerned, terrified. He cancelled a meeting with the Japanese finance minister and was out the door before his assistant could even arrange the car. Mia wasn't sure how to respond. The image of James, always so controlled, in a state of panic over her, was difficult to reconcile with the man who had so easily walked away months ago. And these past few days, Mrs. Winters went on, straightening items on the dresser, he's been different, more present. He actually ate breakfast at the table yesterday instead of taking calls. I found him looking at nursery designs on his tablet. Her eyes crinkled with a smile. That man has never so much as glanced at an interior decorating website in all the years I've known him. Despite herself, Mia felt a warmth spreading in her chest at the thought of James planning for their child's arrival. He hurt me, she said quietly, giving voice to the fear that had been holding her back. How do I know he won't do it again? Mrs. Winters nodded understandingly. You don't. That's the hard truth about relationships, dear. But sometimes people make mistakes they truly regret, mistakes that change them. The question is whether you think what you might build together is worth the risk. With those words, she excused herself, leaving Mia alone with thoughts that seemed somehow clearer than before. 2 hours later, Mia found herself in the passenger seat of James's less conspicuous Range Rover as they left the city behind. They'd managed to evade the photographers through the building's service entrance, though the escape had felt uncomfortably like a covert operation. As urban sprawl gave way to rolling countryside, neither spoke much. James seemed to sense her need for space, focusing on the road while occasionally glancing at her, with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. The estate, when they finally arrived, took Mia's breath away. Set back from a private road, the modern house of glass and stone seemed to rise organically from the landscape, surrounded by mature trees just beginning to show autumn colors. Inside, the spaces were warm and inviting despite their size, less ostentatious than she'd expected, with comfortable furnishings and natural materials. "This was my grandmother's land," James explained, as he carried her bag to a suite on the ground floor. "The original farmhouse burned down years ago. I rebuilt here because it was always my favorite place as a child, somewhere I could just be a kid, not a Callaway heir." The personal revelation touched something in Mia. It was a glimpse of the James she'd fallen for, the man beneath the billionaire facade who had vulnerabilities and memories just like anyone else. The suite he'd prepared for her was lovely, a spacious bedroom with views of the woods, a sitting area with a fireplace, and a luxurious bathroom. But it was the adjoining room that made her pause. It had been set up as a nursery, not finished but begun. The walls were a soft, neutral cream, the furniture simple but high quality. A rocking chair sat by the window, and beside it, a small bookshelf already contained classic children's books. "I hope it's not too presumptuous," James said uncertainly, watching her reaction. "I started it a few days ago, but I wanted to leave the final decisions to you. The colors, the theme, whatever you want." Mia's hand trailed over the smooth wood of the crib. "You did this yourself?" He nodded, seeming almost embarrassed. "I wanted it to be personal, not just something I paid someone to design. My grandfather taught me woodworking. The chair was his project, actually. I just refinished it." Tears pricked Mia's eyes as she absorbed the meaning behind his actions. This wasn't about money or control or even making amends. This was a father preparing for his child's arrival with his own hands, creating something lasting and meaningful. That evening, they ate dinner on the terrace, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. The chef James had arranged had prepared a meal specifically designed for Mia's nutritional needs, but had then discreetly disappeared, leaving them alone. "Thank you for coming here," James said as they finished their meal. "I know it wasn't an easy decision." Mia nodded, sipping her sparkling water. "It feels like I'm living someone else's life," she admitted. 3 weeks ago, I was working double shifts at the diner, trying to figure out how I'd afford a one-bedroom apartment before the baby came. Now I'm hiding out at a billionaire's country estate, while the tabloids speculate about our relationship." James winced slightly. "When you put it that way, it does sound a bit surreal." "It is surreal," Mia insisted, but without hostility. "Your world is completely foreign to me, James. I grew up in foster care, worked since I was 15, put myself through community college one class at a time. I've never had anyone to rely on but myself." "You can rely on me," he said quietly. Mia met his gaze across the table. "Can I? You left once before when things got complicated." "That was the biggest mistake of my life," James replied, his voice thick with emotion. "I let other people's expectations dictate my choices. My parents, the board, society. I listened to everyone except my own heart." He leaned forward, his eyes intense. "I won't make that mistake again, Mia. Not with you, and not with our child." In the soft evening light, with crickets chirping in the surrounding woods and the scent of late summer flowers hanging in the air, Mia felt her carefully constructed walls beginning to crumble. "I'm scared," she confessed, "not just of being hurt again, but of this whole life. The scrutiny, the expectations, the enormous gap between your world and mine. What if it's not my world or your world anymore?" James suggested. "What if we build something new together? Something that takes the best of both?" The idea was appealing, a fresh start, a new foundation built on mutual respect and shared purpose. "I don't expect everything to be fixed overnight," James continued, when she didn't immediately respond. "Trust takes time to rebuild. But I'm asking for the chance to earn yours again day by day." He reached across the table, his hand open in invitation. "We're going to be parents together, Mia. That's a lifetime connection, regardless of anything else. I'd like to see if it could be more, but if friendship is all you can offer right now, I'll gratefully accept that." Mia looked at his outstretched hand. the hand of a man who could purchase anything he desired but was asking for something money couldn't buy, her trust. Slowly she placed her hand in his. "One day at a time," she agreed softly. 6 months later, as spring transformed the estate's grounds with new life, Mia sat in the rocking chair James had refinished, their newborn daughter asleep in her arms. Sunlight streamed through the nursery windows, casting a golden glow over the peaceful scene. So much had changed in the months since they'd come to the estate. What had begun as a temporary refuge had become home. The media interest had eventually faded, as James's firm but respectful handling of the situation gave them little sensational material to work with. More importantly, the relationship between Mia and James had evolved, tentatively at first, then with growing confidence. They'd spent long evenings talking, really talking about their pasts, their fears, their hopes for the future. James had shared the pressures of growing up a Calloway, the weight of expectations that had led him to make choices that weren't true to himself. Mia had opened up about her childhood in foster care, her determination to create stability for herself, and her terror of depending on anyone else. Day by day, brick by brick, they'd built something new together, a relationship founded on honesty, mutual respect, and the deep love they both felt for their unborn child. Romance had rekindled naturally, neither rushed nor forced, but blossoming from the solid foundation they'd established. Now, as Mia gently rocked their week-old daughter, she heard James's footsteps approaching. He entered quietly, his face softening as it always did when he saw their child. "How are my girls?" he asked, kneeling beside the chair to gaze adoringly at the tiny face nestled against Mia's chest. "Perfect," Mia replied with a tired smile. "She just ate and went right back to sleep." James brushed a gentle finger over their daughter's downy head. "She's amazing," he whispered. "You're both amazing." As they sat together in the peaceful nursery, their small family complete and content, Mia reflected on the unexpected journey that had brought them here. A chance meeting, a whirlwind romance, a painful separation, and then, through the most unexpected circumstances, a second chance that had changed everything. The accident that had nearly taken her life had instead given her something precious, the opportunity to build a life with a man who had learned from his mistakes, who valued her strength and independence even as he offered his support, who looked at their daughter with the same wonder and devotion that filled her own heart. "What are you thinking about?" James asked, noticing her thoughtful expression. Mia smiled, leaning down to press a kiss to their daughter's forehead before meeting James's gaze. "I'm thinking that sometimes the most beautiful destinations come from the most unexpected detours." He nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. Rising from his kneeling position, he leaned forward to kiss her softly. "I'm exactly where I'm meant to be," he murmured against her lips. "With the family I never knew I needed, but can't imagine living without." Outside, spring sunshine bathed the estate in warm light, promising new beginnings and growth. Inside, in the nursery, James had built with his own hands, a family that had found each other against all odds, embraced their future. One day, one moment, one heartbeat at a time.